Ladies and gentlemen, we do thank you very much for your attention, and now we invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the
Welcome to our top travel destinations. I am your host, Kevin Flanagan. I have been editor of the weekly travel news column in the Sunday Independent and the Fine Wine and Food Guide, and I am here to use my decades of experience to help you know exactly where to stay, eat, drink, shop, and explore when visiting the world's top travel destinations. So sit back and enjoy the wonders of travel as we take off on our magical journey together. Welcome to the Top Travel Destination podcast. My name is Kevin Flanagan, and I'm here to take you on a journey. And this week, we're going to somewhere very special. We're going to Boston, and we're going to join the greatest rock band in the world, an Irish rock band, U2. U2 are currently finishing a groundbreaking, spectacular residency in the Sphere in Las Vegas. U2 are used to breaking the mold. I wanted to give you an insight into what it's actually like to tour with the world's biggest band, because I had that unique opportunity in Boston in 2006, and I learnt a lot. And I'm going to lift the curtain and give you an insight that not many people get. For me, it was a dream to follow and cover this amazing Irish outfit. Living in Ireland, I was a huge U2 fan. I'd always followed them from Live Aid to Glastonbury. I'd held my child and my grandkids and sung to them One or It's a Beautiful Day. I'll spare you any more of that. So when they announced their tour of America in 2006, I had a special in because I was a friend with the then U2 manager Paul McGuinness and actually played tennis with his wife Kathy. But even then, it was no easy thing to become a reporter, backstage, behind the scenes reporter for U2, because they surround themselves with Rottweilers. These are the handlers, the bodyguards, the PR agencies. After a week with the band, one-on-one, I really understood why. Everybody wants a piece of the action. Everyone wants to meet Bono, of course, and then there's the Edge, Larry, Adam Clayton, the bass player. And they couldn't perform and they couldn't actually function if they weren't protected. So I got to understand that. So we were given great access, got a commission from the Herald, which was the national evening newspaper in Ireland, to spend a week, free shows with the band at the Fleet Centre, as it was then called, a big basketball or ice hockey centre in Boston, 20,000 seater, indoors. We had the privilege of staying with the crew at the Marriott Hotel. But what you've got to understand, what I very soon learned, it was a fast learning curve being a rock groupie for a week, which I hadn't been before, is that everybody has their place in the hierarchy of the world's greatest rock band. At the very pinnacle, of course, are the four lads. Then is Paul and his entourage, the manager. Live Nation were promoting it. They were next in line. And then it drip-fed down from the likes of the sound guy, who was an Irishman, who was a very, very important job to make the sound work in these big echoing halls. Lighting, lots of special effects, and then each of the four members has their own sort of music technician. For example, we interviewed a guy called Dallas, who's the Edge's guitar technician. They all lived under the stage on this particular tour and the way that the show was structured. And we were lucky enough to actually go under the stage before the show actually started. We talked to these incredible musicians in their own right, like Dallas. Dallas showed us all the different guitars that the Edge had, the backup guitars. Before a big rock concert, you'll sometimes see some guys with long hair playing the guitar, and you think, well, what are they doing there? They're actually the technicians who are getting everything ready, doing sound checks, making sure the reverb right, the balance is right. A lot of these big halls like the Fleet Centre are not sound friendly. They're not built like the Sphere was in Vegas, which is perfect pitched sound. But these other places are designed for ice hockey teams, so there are lots of challenges for the sound techs. But that happened a little later. We arrived in Boston, a place of great American history, a fantastic city with a great Irish connection. It was very Irish when we arrived because it didn't stop raining for the first 3 days we were there. We got stuck in with the other members of the crew, sharing breakfast with them, and soon got to know them very well, and the supporting acts as well. It was very interesting because once you're a member of this sort of crew and the media, those who are privileged enough to get full access, like myself and Barbara, my photographer, had, you're a very rare breed indeed. You share the same sort of exit and entry. So we got the band bus, and that left at 3 o'clock every afternoon on the day of a gig. You are taken to the Fleet Centre through the traffic. You arrive, you go through security, and then you're backstage. And it's a strange world in the rock world when you're actually backstage. You have your laminate on, and you're free to wander wherever you like. Well, on the very first gig, we arrived with the crew, and we had a certain procedure that we were going to do. We were going to start off by interviewing the sound guitar techs. That's how we got to meet Dallas and the other technicians who helped put the band on key. Then after that, we had the most interesting of interviews. We met a guy called the Hair Puller. Now, I'm not kidding you about this. This was a guy who's actually related to one of the band members. I think he was a nephew. He dressed all in black. He took us around and he showed us. His job was to stop fans plucking the hairs off Bono's legs as he did the walkabout on the heart-shaped stage that projected out into the huge audience. So Bono was on his own when he went around this narrow little heart-shaped stage, and fans who got into the pit, as it's called, would reach up and they'd grab his leg and they'd try to pull the hair off his leg. Some of them were successful and actually sold it on eBay. Can you believe it? I kid you not. So this particular gentleman's job was to go around dressed like a ninja, and as these desperate hands of these Italian fans reached up to grab Bono's legs, not for the faint-hearted, I'd say, he would come and gently, or not so gently, remove it. So this was fascinating. I can remember turning to Barbara, who was clicking away on her huge camera. She was a petite Italian lady and was absolute genius behind the lens, and she was flicking furiously away as we talked to the hair puller guy. By now, the excitement for the first show was building within us, and we were hungry. It was like now 6 o'clock. The band had done their sound check. Everybody's kept out of the sound check. The band just want to do their own thing, and they also go over their particular list of songs, their song list for that night, because the band need to change it around, as we soon discovered by talking to members of the band and the crew. They're doing 150 shows. I suppose that's one of the most extraordinary things I learned from being behind the stage and going to 3 consecutive live shows. Whenever you go to see a great band or a great artist, whether it's Ed Sheeran, whoever takes your fancy on the big stadium rock tours, Taylor Swift, Coldplay, it always appears as if this is their first show and their only show. So when you go along, you're not interested in the fact that they've played 80 shows before in Japan and in Europe, and they're going to play another 70 shows in Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. No, you're there. You've spent your moolah. You want and you believe it's the only show. And there's a certain sort of magic about that the band have to buy into. So what I noticed was that the way they keep it fresh is to change up the song list, to sometimes put in surprises, sometimes put in songs they may not even have rehearsed, just to keep them on their toes. Because at the end of the day, it's really like a magician. It's like a magic act. They have to persuade themselves and the audience that this is the one and only time they're playing for you. And that was one of the real insights I got from seeing 3 shows in a row and then following the band to Ireland when they played Croke Park, big outdoor stadium, by which time I was in awe of the fact that they could still give the impression that this was the first and only show they were playing. I also had an insight that they earn a lot of money, rock bands, but I really understood that U2 deserved every penny that they got, because the pressure is absolutely enormous. So not only have you got 150 members of the crew that you have to keep going, that doubles when they went to Europe to do the outdoor. There's 300 to 400 members for the big outdoor stadiums crew. The Fleet Centre in Boston, where we were, was much more intimate, only 20,000, not the 150,000 that they do in Europe. So it was quite tight. We then decided to go along and eat before the show itself kicked up. You could feel the energy growing. We went along. There were, again, a hierarchy of feeding stations. The band had their own chef. They were separated in a certain area, all cordoned off with their own security. You couldn't go anywhere near it, nor would you want to impose on them. And then there were a couple of areas where we went and we ate. The food was fantastic. I can remember sitting down with one of the costume ladies who looked after the costumes for the band, would have everything cleaned and washed and pressed and ready. There were a number of changes because the band gets very wet and sweaty when on stage. There's so many powerful lights and they're generating so much energy that it can get very, very hot. And we sat down with this costume lady backstage and we got an insight as to how she designed this sort of leather jacket for Bono and the trousers for the Edge and the shoes for Adam and the t-shirt for Larry, who was banging away at the drums. And that was really exciting. I remember I had a lovely curry, vegetarian curry, and then we got to meet the manager's office, said hello to Paul McGuinness, thanked him for allowing us to be so close to the band. And then the excitement was growing. You could hear the fans out in the auditorium. It was like listening to a kettle boil. It was getting bigger and bigger, and the energy was building up, and it was like a pressure cooker, and it was exciting. Just before the band went on, all the VIPs came to what's called the Green Room. And in the Fleet Centre, it was like a storeroom that had been converted into a little bar. You got such dignitaries suddenly walking in, like the former Vice President Al Gore. Patrick Kennedy came in. Then, 5 minutes before the show went off, who strode in as calm as you like? Bono and the Edge. They were actually, you'd think they were out for a walk on a Sunday, not glad-handing former vice presidents. Edge had, I think, a bottle of Heineken, maybe it was Zero Heineken, I don't know, and they clinked glasses, had a swig. And what struck me, everybody was excited in the green room. All the VIPs were very excited. Barbara had to go off to do her duties and get into the pit where all the other camera guys were. I stayed there talking to Patrick Kennedy. I remember I took a photo of him. I was going to send a live report to the Evening Herald, so we had to get that off as soon as the event was over, because this was all live. And so I was taking quotes from him. I had my picture taken with him. And then the security guy came in with his light and said, "Okay, everybody to the lighting desk." Here's another insight. If you are a VIP and you're in the inner circle, then you get to go into the lighting quadrant. So you're led out, surrounded by a posse of, and you'll see this if you're ever up in the stands and you're looking down at Taylor Swift or whoever it is, Ed Sheeran, you will see just before the show starts, maybe when the support act has gone off, you'll see a little group surrounded by security, maybe of 20, 30 people, all moving in a huddle. And you're led into the big structure right in the middle of the ground floor on any rock stadium, and you'll see this big tower. And that is the lighting tower. And it goes quite high, and inside that is the guy who's controlling all the lights. And sometimes at the bottom there's a sound desk. The sound desk in this particular Boston U2 show was by the side of the stage. All the VIPs are brought into this cordoned off area. So you're bang center in the middle of the floor, looking directly up at the stage. And I went along with this group. And then you wait. I can remember as I stood there with Al Gore in front of me and the Kennedys on the right. Paul McGuinness was there in an Aran sweater, I remember. He gave me the high five, and we then all turned and looked at the stage. Now, a certain song is always played before rock bands come on. They all pick their favourite song. The song that you two were using was a Canadian supergroup called Arcade Fire. I can remember Larry later saying that whenever he heard this song once a tour was over, and he'd get cold shivers and the adrenaline would start pumping, because the band members, they are in a huddle together, and they are like the gladiators going out into the arena. They are the ones that are now ready to go out and perform. And so as Arcade Fire played and that song played out, the lights went down and there was this murmur. And suddenly on stage, there was the City of Shining Lights opening chord. There was Bono appearing majestically out of thin air. And this tsunami of a roar that lifted me up from the back of my neck upwards as the whole 20,000 stadium rose to their feet and roared their approval. I get the goosebumps now. I can feel those riffs of the edge, that thumping bass line of Adam, the drums kicking off the snare, and Bono lifting his head up, the shades on his glasses, and his microphone lifted to the heavens as he let out that unique voice of his, and the show got going. Having the Access All Areas pass was really, really interesting because we could walk around. After 3 songs, traditionally, and this used to be to get the photographers out so they'd get to appear in the next day's newspapers, on the front cover of the newspapers, all the photographers are ushered out unceremoniously after the first 3 songs. But Barbara had her magic ticket, so she stayed on. Not only did she stay on, she joined me. And we wandered around, we talked to fans, we got the sense of where everybody was coming for. As this great show started to wind down, we went backstage for what's called the Get Out. Now, I don't think there's anything more exciting in the world of rock than the Get Out. So let me describe exactly what that is. Firstly, you go through the security, which is incredibly tight because they don't want any random nut job hurting one of the band members. We had our magic pass, we were let through, and we waited at the back. Just imagine this. In front of us is this huge back of the stage. You can see through little glimpses of the audience on the far side of the front of the stage. They're on their feet cheering. They know that the concert's coming to the end. The guys are doing their 3rd encore. The lights are going up, but the area behind is open. It's like a small car park. So we were standing there, and beside us were 4 black SUVs, huge, big, body-plated, armoured SUVs. These are for each member of the band to bring their own little entourage, their own hangers-on, whoever it is. And at the very front were 4 fantastic Harley-Davidsons with Boston's finest, their police outriders. We waited. The security was very tense. The last chords of the song, Where the Streets Have No Name, reprised, rang out, and the audience rose as one. And then 4 figures appeared. They were covered in white toweling dressing gowns. Each had their own security man who led them to their car. I can remember Bono had a cigarette. He allows himself to smoke 1 cigarette a day, a bit like myself. He was led to the first because, as I later discovered, he was going to Washington to meet, I think it was President Bush, about the G8 conference. So he was flying off separately to the rest of the band. So he had the outliners and they roared off. The bike started, the doors of the 4 SUVs slammed, the followers got in, whoever was part of that inner circle. the sirens went off and they were gone. The doors lifted and they were gone. Bono off to catch his private jet to Washington, the rest of the band back to the Oriental. And I'll tell you a little bit about their hotel in a second. So this was so extraordinary. We're standing there. The band had gone within 30 seconds of the last chord fading. The audience, we can see them through little slats in where the stage was, are still on their feet expecting one more encore, which they didn't get, I'm afraid to say. And then the realization dawned, the house lights went up, and everybody left. This was a bit grim, I'd have to say, for us, because actually we had missed the crew bus and we hadn't been booked onto it. We had to make our way with the 20,000 people in the pouring rain back to our hotel. So suddenly, from being in the most elevated upper echelons of this fantastic world, we were now just down with the hoi polloi. It was a wake-up call, really. We had a long walk in the rain back. I filed my story. The story was so good that when I came back to Dublin, Paul McGinn actually got in touch with me. He bought up 400 copies of the Herald. I had a 4-page spread in it, and he gave it to all the crew members, because what I'd done was I cleverly pitched my story to be not about the 4 members of the band, but about the supporting people who keep a band on the road, about the people who feed the band, who dress the band, the technicians, the guy who stops people picking the hair off the legs of Bono. And I think that was a very clever idea. Well, the final night, there was a fantastic party. We were taken along to the Mandarin Oriental. U2 had the 12th floor all to themselves. The security again was insane. You couldn't get in unless you had your accreditation and you were down on the list. There was no way between the police and the private security. But we managed to get into that lift and we were taken up. Myself, I managed to get my sister involved as well, and Barbara, and we went to the final night party before the band were leaving America to go to Europe and the open-air concert. So it was a big deal. The owners of Slane Castle were there. There were film directors. There were film stars. It was glitzy. The champagne flowed. But my final reflection on the life of being on tour with a rock star only came when I went back to Dublin, and a week later I went to Croke Park to see U2 as an ordinary guy sitting in the stands with Barbara the photographer. And we looked, and I suddenly thought, my God, those guys, it is all smoke and mirrors. It's like a magic show, because it's not really real. They have to make each show feel unique. And I also felt a certain weariness. You can be caught up in this vortex of a fan and a groupie and a hanger-on, and we saw our fair share of groupies and hangers-on. But it's a sad life, because you have to go back to your day-to-day reality, and the members of the band fly off literally into the night in their private jet. And I think it was quite sobering, and it brought me back to earth, that I have my own life, and my life's good. And Bono and the boys actually earn their right to be rock stars, and they do it in sort of blood, sweat and tears. So here's to U2, here's to Boston, a wonderful city of which I will do a podcast just on where to stay, shop, explore, because there's plenty to do in that great American historical place, full of Irish connections. But above all else, I'll remember the pride of seeing this great Irish outfit conquering the world, this great Irish singer Bono, just taking the crowd, this roaring mass of 20,000 people, in the palm of his hand as he sang, "One life, but we're not the same. We get to carry each other, one."